So, welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Benny. It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this conversation. Looking forward to where this leads us.
You're very welcome. So, Benny, tell the listeners about you and how did you decide to be a life coach and what is Stoic coaching practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I could see, by how you asked that with the Stoic coaching practices that need some explanation. And I agree, right?
Mhm.
Especially now when we talk about philosophy, we can have certain ideas, but I'll get to that in a bit. And first about myself, I'm Benny. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm from a very small village in the south of the country. So and I left the Netherlands for 14 years ago to move to Spain, then to Dubai, and now I'm kind of traveling around. I've sold everything, so everything I own fits in my backpack, and I'm currently in Panama visiting some close friends. So it's and I'm doing like house and pet sitting in the meantime, just to make it a little bit more affordable as I build out my company via Stoic and the podcast Street Stoic. So just to kind of make it a little bit more um, financially stable. So and I like looking after pets, so that's kind of filling my cup on that side. There was work and personal life as well. And yeah, along the way, and I think the interesting thing when you ask about questions like how did you start with philosophy or self-help or that self-growth, most people they say, and I've listened to some people mention that on your podcast as well, some other interviewees, they said, you meet a difficult time, you have a difficult moment in life and you need some help, some guidance. And that's where I met the Stoic philosophy. I was reading about different philosophies, but this one really spoke to me. There was something about it that just made me feel like this was me. So about 2.5 years ago, I started really putting it into practice and started writing about it. So I started a blog called the Stoic Padawan, which is something that kind of my nerdy side likes because I'm a big fan of Star Wars. And Star Wars, the Padawan is the Jedi learner,
Yeah.
and I felt like I was a lifelong learner. So I didn't want to call myself a Stoic, but the Padawan was perfect. So I was super excited that it wasn't picked yet. So that's why I started that blog and I started writing about it just to kind of galvanize the knowledge for myself to make it to put it better in perspective and more focused. Because if I write for myself, I don't know about you, but if I write for myself, my own journal, it goes from left to right, up and down, and just all over the place. But if I write for other people, then I know that I've got to have some structure. And that really helped me to really get these ideas better in my head. And I started speaking on X. I don't know if you know the spaces that they host on X.
Mhm.
It's like live conversations where people can join as a speaker, as a listener. And we've been doing that for like 2 years. Actually, yesterday we had our 100th recording on that space, and it's really great. We have a great community there. And first, like with Stoicism, like people think about men. It's like, oh, this is this philosophy for men. But the great thing about these spaces, we have so many women show up, and I love it because it gives it completely different perspective of the philosophy and how everybody applies it. So that's kind of how I rolled into Stoicism for myself and how I started speaking about it, how I started writing about it, and I saw the value in it, that it could help other people. So that's when I started the life coaching practice. And it isn't meant to turn people into Stoics. That's what we always say in like the spaces in the podcast. But I do feel it's kind of my goal to show people that the importance of having a philosophy of life, of thinking about your life, of asking yourself the questions, what is important, and how can you find that kind of purpose, or at least give yourself a kind of a direction. And for me, the Stoics, they do that. They give me a sense of direction in moments of difficulties. And that's what I use during the coaching and when we have these conversations. And just when I speak to people, I use that for my background to ask them questions for some guidance, but I do let them explore themselves. I think that that's also the great thing about philosophy. It literally means the love of wisdom. And I think that that is a really important part, to just be open minded, ask people questions, be curious, and learn about life. And I think that that's the great thing about this philosophy and also what I try to do with the coaching.
Okay. So, Benny, what you're saying is that Stoic is getting to know yourself, being who you are, and kind of that's what it is, or
Yeah, so and this is oftentimes a misconception. The modern day use of the word stoic is kind of seen as like being unemotional, right? Oh, this person reacted stoic to this situation. They didn't show any emotions, but that's furthest from the truth. Like there's the capital S stoicism and the lowercase S stoicism. And that is that kind of thing that you can see in the manosphere, that masculinity sphere is like, oh no, you have to have this stiff upper lip and don't show any emotions. But the Stoics, they tell us, no, you've got to go deep inside. You've got to really ask yourself those questions, because if you don't do that, then you will always hit that wall and you will never really solve it. So the Stoic philosophy dates back to like I think 2,500 years ago, from the ancient Greece, around the time of Socrates, Plato, that kind of time. And one of the core tenets, and this is why I like it, it's based on virtue. So they just tell you you have to be virtuous, and virtue can be broken down in wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. And those are the four kind of guides that you can apply to every situation. So they say, okay, be virtuous and live in accordance with your nature and nature in general. They see us as individuals, but mainly as parts of the world. As they say, if they ask you like where you're from, don't tell them like the city where you're from. No, I'm from the world. I'm a cosmopolitan, right? They were the first ones who kind of used that word. So the basic thing is just about being a better person, and we do that by applying the virtues, but also they give us tools like, for example, the dichotomy of control. And I've seen this so many times, and I've heard many people talk about it. It's like, oh, you sure you're not into like Stoic philosophy? And the dichotomy, because the dichotomy of control is like, we have two spheres. One sphere is like what's out of your control and what's in your control. And the Stoics say, in my control are my opinion, my judgment, and my actions, and all of the rest is outside. So I can decide how to judge a situation or how to judge a person. That's up to me. And they would even tell us to rest your judgment. Don't be too hasty with your judgment, because you don't know everything. And we label things as good and bad very quickly. But if they tell us take a pause, apply your reason and logic, but because that's what we've been giving from the rational universe, from God, from the logos, and we have this extra level. So we have our emotions, right? They will happen as an impulse. So if something scary happens or something that makes you angry, that's that impulse that we can't, change. That's going to happen. But then they say, then we have this moment to have a pause
Mhm.
and to judge the situation, to apply a reason and logic, and then look for the right action, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to push our emotions away, because they give us the information about what was triggered, what affected us, and why it affected us. So then, after we gone through the motion of that moment, we can look back, right? The Stoics are very big on reflecting, journaling, meditating. It's kind of the Western variation of Buddhism, Taoism. I think that's where you should, if people ask you like, how do I compare this? That's pretty much where we can go. And they gave us so many more tools to kind of live that peaceful life, which is the ultimate goal of Stoicism, is to they call it eudaimonia. It's a kind of a state of peace of mind, tranquility. Yeah, that's kind of like the end goal of Stoicism.
So, Benny, why is Stoic coaching, why is it focused on practical? Can somebody who follows this philosophy, can they judge themselves, or are they only allowed to judge others?
No, and it's not necessarily about the judgment. It's about applying the reason and logic,
Okay.
right? Looking for the truth, because in the end of the day, that's what philosophy is about. We look for the truth. So that's about what's happening, right? But we have our filters. We look at it through like lenses of our eyes, right? And if we feel better about ourselves, then the world looks better. And if we feel sad, and the world looks a little bit darker. So those kind of filters that we apply. So we first have to do that inner work. First, we have to look at ourselves, ask ourselves those questions, do that deep introspection. So that's where we've got to focus. And by becoming a better person ourselves, we also become a better person for the people around us. We can, give a right example, give them the support that they need. Like I saw with one of your previous interviews you had on, I think it was with Natalie, yeah, on the Joy, where she was struggling with weight, right? She was like, okay, maybe it's this problem. And then she spoke to someone. No, it's about your childhood, right? It's about where you're coming from. And that's what the Stoics say as well. The problem, there's always like this first principle source of the things that you struggle with, and that's inside. Because
Mhm.
no one, they say like we always have free will, whatever the situation is, because no one can influence our thoughts and our judgments. That's the only thing that we do. We allow people to do that, but if we know who we are and if we know what our principles and our values are, then that's going to be more difficult. And then even in the most difficult situation, that's what they say, right? It's more difficult to actually do it.
Mhm.
But that's what they say, like even like in the most difficult situation, we can still be free in our mind. And that's kind of what they look at. That's kind of that difference of like a free will and on all the other things that happens around us, like the world, like they talk about fate, fortune, and fortune isn't always on our side. That's something that happens, but they say let's not label things as good and bad. Let's use them as a training ground. Like Marcus Aurelius, I don't know if you know Marcus Aurelius, but the former Roman emperor, like 2,000 years ago, the powerful person in the world. He wrote his journal, the Meditations, and he said there, like, the obstacle is the way. Like, if you go through those difficult times with the right attitude, not just like, breaking through the wall, no, looking at the wall, examining it, and going through it, and not seeing it as something bad, but looking at it like, this is my moment to learn, to grow, to know who I am, because that's how we learn more about ourselves, through difficulties.
Wow, nicely said, Benny. So in this business that the Stoic coaching that you're doing right now, are you solo or do you have other Stoic life coaches involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that this also shows the community. Like, I started doing those spaces 2 years ago as a speaker. I just joined them, and as I started my own journey, and I was writing, and where the company is, Via Stoic is right now, it's kind of a testament of my personal growth, because I started with those coaching of those spaces. I started with my blog, and then I got to meet some great people. For example, Bryce, who is the co-host on Street Stoics as well, and then we have Brendan, who, the three of us, we started with this company, and we met each other in these spaces. Like, as I said, I'm from a very tiny village. The chances of me finding someone who is interested in things like this to talk about, most of my family and friends, they tell me, Benny, it's great, you go talk to someone else about this, because I really, it's just something that doesn't interest everybody. So finding this community online was great for me. And like, we've been doing this now for 2 years, every Tuesday, every Thursday, and every Saturday. And I make time. Like, I'm currently traveling, but I make sure that I don't travel on those days, because these spaces are important to me as a person. So that's where we kind of met. And at one point I started hosting some of these spaces, where first I was a speaker, then I became the host. And then Bryce became my co-host, and we started talking about, during the spaces, but even after, it was like, hey, do you have time to chat? We started talking about our life, about our personal life, but also about these practices, right? About what we were about the topic, and we would go on for hours just to kind of talk. And the same with Brendan. At one point, I was like, we got to do something more with this. So that's where the podcast developed from. And then last November, I came here to Panama, where Brendan and Kara live, and I've met them through the spaces. And they were going on a trip. And like I said, I'm a pet sitter, so I was like, you know what, you go on a trip, I'll come to your place, I'll stay there. I'll come a little bit earlier so we get to speak and meet each other in real life. And then as you leave, then I will watch your house. But unfortunately, I arrived here and there was a national strike, so I stayed here for a month, and we couldn't go anywhere because there was no, gasoline or propane or anything. Kind of like, the lockdown all over again. But it was, at the end of the day, it was great. We got to know each other very well, and this is where we really started to talk. Brendan and I and Bryce, we really started to talk about joining forces. That we wanted to help as many people as we could, and I lack some of the business skills and some of those extra things. So that's why for me it was great to work together with Brendan and Bryce to really point it forward. So we do, the three of us do offer the coaching, and obviously there are differences in our personalities, and I think that that's great, to offer something different to people. But that's kind of how we grew together. And the great thing about it is we are building the company, we are building our relationship together, but we also building ourselves up by challenging ourselves and by looking at, like, oh, what do we need to do, and learning from each other.
Wow. So are you guys from different places, like different part of the country, or are you all of you guys from the Netherlands, or are you from the Netherlands and the others are from different countries?
Yeah, so I'm from the Netherlands, and then Brendan and Bryce are both from the US,
Oh,
and
okay.
from different sides. One from Florida, one from LA, and but now, Brendan lives in Panama, and Bryce is still in the US, and we met online. Like, so that's why it's great to be able to meet each other in real life as well. But because we've had so many hours of conversations with each other, like online and offline. We know each other very well, and that's the philosophy really binds us.
Okay. So, Benny, what are the steps of Stoic? Like, if somebody had to call you right now and they're like, you know something, I'm interested in this, what are the different steps that you would guide them through and get into that Stoic mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it kind of changed, it's kind of different for everyone. So we have the four virtues. You have wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. And for example, for me, temperance is one of the things that I struggle with. Like I quit alcohol, drinking alcohol completely 4 years ago because I knew that it was not good for me, right? And I also knew that my limit is either 0 or 1. Like if I drink one, then it just continues. So I figured I need to make sure that my level, like my limit is 0.
Mhm.
So, and then some people say that's not temperance, right? Because you have to be able to kind of do things in moderation. But I know myself well enough to say that this is the choice that I have. So for me, temperance, and even with food, like I have a sweet tooth. If I have chocolate in the house, it's very, very difficult for me to resist, like just eating it all. So that's something that I'm really practicing, and I'm not not even close to being where I want to be. I have to be honest with this as well. Like I love food, I like to eat, so I need to be able to work on that some more, and that's what I know. And there's other things, but some people, they might struggle with things like anger or like some of the other emotions. So it's very personal, but it is very practical to use. So one example that I noticed the practicality of this is when dealing with colleagues at work. And there was a great quote by Marcus Aurelius that really opened my eyes, who said, that person is bound to be that way. It's like getting angry at a fig tree for secreting juice. And so I was reading this and was like, this is this person, I can't change it. This was an elderly man who was already kind of, being very like playing games at work, or, throwing us under the bus, or just like making all these frustrating remarks. So the next day I went to work with that quote in mind, and I looked at him and I was like, yeah, this is like if I get angry, it's like me putting my hand against the fig tree and just, oh, look at my fingers are sticky, because of that. So I looked at myself, I was like, how can I best deal with a person like this? How can I find ways to not get aggravated? So these are like, and I found, I actually saw the humor in it. I was like, yeah, this is this is like, and I recognized it. So it kind of puts you in a different seat in life. You become the observer instead of the reactor to life. So, and that's why it's difficult. That's why, for example, with coaching, but also with just conversations, you look at like what are the difficult moments in life? What are the pain points? And then you have practices also of gratitude. I think that that's a really big part of Stoicism, where they have like certain Latin phrases like amor fati, love your fate,
Mhm.
embrace it. So the things that happen to you, don't go fighting against them, but embrace them. Okay, what we say as a bad thing, and I'm not sure if you've had these experiences, but I've had it where you say, oh, I didn't get this job, or I have failed this class. This is the worst thing in the world. And then a month later, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that was actually a good thing because now I'm doing this. So
Yeah.
it's very easy to put that judgment. And the Stoics say, accept your faith and remember that you have everything you need inside of you to deal with the moment. And instead of being stuck in the past or living too much in the future, just stay in the moment. So these are some practices, and one of them is also memento mori. Remember that you will die. And they say like, why is death something bad if it happens to everyone? It's the natural course of life, right? And they say and I think personally it needs a rebranding. I think we need to be able to speak more about this topic. But the more we accept it, the more we can also live in the moment and realize like our time is precious. Our time that we have here is super valuable. And then Seneca has a nice quote. He says, life, it's because of death that you are precious in my eyes. Because we have that limit. He says, like, that's why you are valuable to me and unique, and I've got to make the best out of it.
Wow. That was a lot of information, Benny.
Yes.
So where can the listeners get in touch with you? What is your website? And do you have any like speaking engagements coming up on talking about Stoic and just letting people know more about it?
That's a good thing to look into. And so the website that I'm on is viastoica.com. So people can find more information there, or they can go to Street Stoics, the podcast. Streetstoics.com is also a point where they can find, what we do, and then the episodes we bring out weekly episodes based on Stoicism and just looking at general topics of life. And we do these weekly spaces. So I don't know if people are on X, and we are looking out to expand it to different platforms. But at the moment, we are on like Twitter, on X, and there people can find us. For me, it's at the Stoic Padawan, and then we have Stoic Bryce, or Stoic Boggles, um, and that's Brendan. And then just by following there, you can join these spaces for free. They're just like, everybody can join to listen and even to speak, to interact, to engage. So that's where people can find us. And we're on, well, we have like a page on Via Stoic as well on X and all these other social media platforms. So that's where people can find us. But if they want to interact with us for free, then I think the spaces are a great way to start, and then build it out from there.
So, do you have any last words for the listeners about finding tranquility?
Yeah, I think it starts with knowing yourself. And one question that I get a lot is like, what is my purpose in life? I think that's what a lot of people say. And the Stoics, they make it easier for us. They say, like, start with just being a good person. And Marcus Aurelius, he has one quote. He says, to stop talking about what a good person is and just go and be one. And I think, like, if you are looking for it, then just try to be a little bit better every day. This isn't about being perfect, because we aren't. It's just about trying to do your best. And if you fall for some of your flaws or the things that you want to improve, and you have a step back, then accept it and keep moving forward. Learn from it and see things as a lesson. So if you want to have that peace of mind, look at life as a great journey of self-exploration, of learning, of self-growth, and don't focus too much on the end goal, but focus on that journey that we're on.
Wow, nicely said, Benny. Well, thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I love the show. I've been listening to some great episodes here, so thank you for having me on. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Beauty of Colors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the program, and for more information, be sure to visit www.cleanjohnson.com.